What's going on, folks? Ty from BreakerCulture, proud members of the Bench Clear Media team. Go check us out at benchclear.us for all of our great content, channels, episodes. We are averaging 2 fresh new episodes a day for you across all of our content providers. Some great stuff, so be sure to check us out. Now, I know we've had lots of conversations about the nuances between sports card investing and collecting and the hobbyist, traditionalist versus the new modern collector, the flipper, you name it, blah, 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 right? Well, today I have a fascinating conversation with the CEO of Collectable.com. His name is Ezra Levine, and if you haven't heard of Collectable, you're going to hear about it because it is making serious waves within the hobby by providing fractional ownership in massive, rare, powerful sports cards, vintage cards, wax, groups of cards. It is incredible. So what happens is IPOs are initiated and you have the ability to go buy fractional shares in that card. For instance, this morning I logged in because I knew the Jordan rookie, PSA 10 Fleer rookie, was going out for IPO today. And I popped on when the IPO went live to buy some shares. And within minutes, those $10 shares were bought up across the board. And I actually didn't even get mine in. It took me about 12 minutes to get registered and everything else set up. And I was late to the game. But just the way, the trend of the hobby and everything, I love the idea. And Ezra is one sharp dude, guys. I'm going to tell you right now. He knows what he's doing. He's got a great background, was born into the sports car world, so has a great perspective around sports cards thanks to his dad. And I think you're going to be fascinated by his vision for this and his vision for where Collectable fits within the hobby. So enjoy the conversation with Ezra. It is perfect timing for everything happening in the hobby right now. So anyway, before we jump into that, I'll remind you to go check out our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Click the link in the show notes, benchclear.us/ExpressVPN. I keep reminding you guys, but it's as important as ever. You cannot browse the net. You can't go to your eBay sites, your websites, your PayPal, your Squares, your Venmos, all of that stuff that you just take for granted. Your banks, without protecting yourself. And an easy way to do that is just to sign into a VPN. A VPN protects you, it shields you, adds another layer, scrambles the data so your passwords and your data can't be identified and found out. And it's super easy. You click the link, you sign up, and a little app pops up on your Windows PC or your Mac PC, and you just click, hey, I want to sign into my VPN, and it connects you to the nearest network, and you're protected. And it allows you to browse safely with a little peace of mind, knowing that, you know what, you're not exposed every time you go click on something. So again, I've been hacked. I know lots of folks have been hacked in the past. I mean, shoot, we just had another medical breach this morning. Massive medical breach, one of the largest in the nation's history. Hacking is an all-time high. So protect yourself. ExpressVPN. Go click the link in the show notes, benchclear.us/ExpressVPN. All right, enjoy the conversation with Ezra around fractional sports card ownership. Hey, what's going on, Ezra? How you doing, man?
How you doing? What's going on, Ty?
Oh, we're sitting here 45 minutes before the first debate. You and I are anxious, ready to talk about politics. You ready to do this?
Ready to do it. Hit me.
Oh, man. Well, thanks for jumping on the show tonight, man. I've been excited about talking about Collectable and everything you guys are doing for a few weeks now. So are you're in New York City, right? Are you in the city?
I'm in New York City.
Okay.
I grew up here. I was raised here. I grew up here from age 3 all the way through college, and then I went to the University of Michigan. Go Blue! I like to think that I'm the Michigan football curse. From the time that I got on campus, I think we're 0-15 against OSU. But I went to Michigan, came back home to New York, and I live here with my wife and my son, and we've been here ever since I graduated college.
That's awesome. I've heard some rumors of a Desmond Howard jersey being the framed item in your 1-year-old son bedroom.
That's right. That is right. And I have a Michigan helmet over here to my back left over there. So
there you go.
I don't know if our team loves me as much as I love it, But no, it's a passion of mine, sports. I've grown up a huge sports fan, having grown up here in New York. Diehard Yankees fan, Knicks fan, unfortunately, Rangers, Giants, Michigan. So I've been a diehard sports fan my entire life, and it's fun to be able to marry your career with something that you genuinely enjoy.
Oh, absolutely. So how does a New Yorker end up falling in love with Michigan? I'm really curious about that. Was that a family thing?
No, look, I was never a big Michigan fan growing up, right? I didn't really have a college football team. When I applied to the school and I got accepted, I figured, look, I'm going to be going to the school for 4 years. I might as well dive right into it. I happened to go on campus, and we had a really respectable program. My freshman year, I think we were ranked number 2 in the country. And then my sophomore year is where it all went downhill. We were ranked, I believe, 2 in the country going into the season. Our opening day was against Appalachian State, when Michigan was some absurd, like 40-point, favorites against Appalachian State. We paid them $1 million to come to our campus to play us, hoping it was going to be a trouncing opening day, 72-0 score, and they beat us. So that really shattered my entire sophomore year at Michigan, and ever since then, it went from the Lloyd Carr era to the Rich Rodriguez era, and it all went downhill from there.
Oh my goodness! So that ended up costing you a lot more than $1 million. That's what you're saying, huh?
It did.
My goodness! Oh my goodness! So would you err on the side of Michigan football, or would you go to Michigan basketball games if you had the choice? What's kind of your preference?
The basketball program is really good. It's become a basketball school. I hate to say this. I mean, look, I went to the Final Four when we lost to Louisville. I was there in Atlanta. It's nice to have multiple programs who are strong. Actually, our number 1 program at Michigan is not football. It's not basketball. It's hockey. We have a dominant hockey team. Dominant. And I'll say, if anyone winds up in Ann Arbor in the winter, my number 1 recommendation is to go to a Michigan hockey stadium, right? To go into Yost Arena. It's a small, intimate, collegiate feel. They pack you in, coordinated chants the entire time. You're right on the ice. It's really a very cool sports experience.
There you go. You're talking to a guy from Kansas City. I don't see ice rinks around here, so it's foreign language to me.
So you're a Royals guy, I assume?
I am. I'm a
Royals.
We've adopted the Nuggets as our basketball team. It's proximity-wise probably the second closest. Oklahoma City's the closer one. But yeah, that's those are our 3 teams, and we got to go St. Louis Blues. Obviously, it's Missouri. Yeah. But so obviously, you mentioned Yankees. As we were getting ready to start this, you saw Aaron Judge back, right? Hit a 2-run homer first inning.
Yeah, I've got it up here. They're up 3-0 in the bottom of the 3rd. It's been a weird year for the Yankees. It seems like they're all or nothing. When one of the guys are hitting, they score 15 runs, and then when Judge and Sanchez are out, or Stanton gets hurt for the 17th time in a season, it just feels like they can't score a run. But so let's just hope that they get hot at the right time here. It's all it takes in baseball is a couple hot streaks, a win here and there, and you're back in business.
No kid. Are you a fan of the new? Because I was sitting down with my son this afternoon, was looking at the rules. I didn't realize it's best of 3, best of 5, best of 7, and then 7 in the World Series. Are you a fan of that kind of new structure? Or would you?
No, I'm a fan of having more, teams and cities engaged for longer. I think it's cool that they're, like the Marlins are in it all of a sudden. I can't believe the Marlins are in the playoffs. I feel like the Marlins, we're a bottom of the barrel team. Everyone's, knocking on Derek Jeter for gutting the entire franchise. I can't believe they're in the playoffs, right? So it's cool to have more cities and more teams, and to see some of these young guys, right? Like you see the White Sox in the playoffs, right? It's just cool to see these young studs who have a chance to shine on the postseason stage, who probably wouldn't otherwise. So it's a little, as a traditionalist, as someone who grew up in baseball, and you just kind of understand the structure. It's just different. It's weird, but it's fun to see. It's fun to, and look, as a Yankee fan, we finished I think 5th or 6th. So if we didn't change these rules, we'd be out of the playoffs right now.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, it's funny, right? As a hobbyist, right, in the sports card hobby, it's hard not to like more teams making the playoffs. Right. There's more rookies in there, right? There's more young guys that probably wouldn't have had a shot 2 or 3 years from now. So hey, I'll take it. I'll take it, it was probably a good transition point to kind of the hobby in general. I'd love to know your story, right? Obviously, CEO, founder of Collectable, which we'll talk about, fractional ownership, all the cool stuff that is pretty hip in the sports card world. But what is your background with sports cards and kind of how did you get into the hobby?
Yeah, so I started when I was born, pretty much. My dad has been in the hobby forever. He collected Mantle stuff, Kovac stuff, comic books, old programs. So I was always surrounded by it. I remember going to the Nationals a couple times as a kid. Yeah. And my dad would always say, I'll never forget this. He's like, I've made so much more money in the hobby than I ever did in the stock market. And I never really took him seriously until, I just started to learn a lot more about the industry. My personal background is like probably every other kid in America. I collected and traded baseball cards with all my friends. Yep. I remember being at summer camp and my parents, for a gift, they'd send up, a box of baseball cards. And it was the most exciting thing in the world to open the box and show off who you had and trade them with your friends. It was great. Yeah. And then like every other kid who grew up in the 90s, I had this dream that my cards were going to be, sort of minting me a fortune when I got older, only to find out that they're completely worthless. So I'm sure a very common story with a lot of other people as I lost interest over time, as I got in my teenage years, and I kind of forgot all about this sports card thing until the past couple of years, when it's been really exciting to see it take off again. It's been really exciting to see some of the innovation happening, to see some of the right sizing of production, to see some of the, it's a really exciting time to be in the hobby. And there are a lot of other people, and I'm sure this is going to come up. There are a lot of people who right now would think we're in this asset bubble, everything's overly inflated. But you can also find a lot of other people who think that this industry is just getting started. And what I love about it is that's what makes a market, right? Like that's what makes something fun. People have different of opinions. Some people think it'll go up, some people think it'll go down, and I don't think anyone really knows. But I think it's an exciting time to be a part of it. I think there's a lot of innovation happening, a lot of exciting things happening. I think there's a gigantic opportunity to, clean up some of the bad actors in the space, to eliminate a lot of the forgeries, a lot of the trimming, just with new entrants, with new technology, with a new infusion of capital coming into the industry. I think it's just a really exciting time to be part of it all.
I love it. You're passionate. Oh my goodness. This is going to be fun.
Got to be passionate about it, right? I mean, there's a lot to be passionate about. It's sports. It's with as much nonsense as there is going on in this world right now, right? I mean, you got to hang on to sports. Sports is the one unifier of this country. It's the one unifier of the world. It's very exciting, right? So, and it just so happens that you and I get to do this for a living, or for our hobby also. So. Yeah. It's there's a lot to be excited about. I'm excited about Collectable's opportunity. We can talk about that in a little bit. But I'm generally very excited for this industry at large.
100%. We'll dig into a lot of these components here in a second. So real quick, growing up then, who'd you PC? Did you PC anybody in particular? Was it all Yankees all the time for you? Was there anybody kind of? I
was a big Yankee collector. Look, I grew up here in the, not in the golden years originally in Yankee baseball. Like, we had a couple of dark years in the early 90s for sure. But, when I was coming of age, really, it was the beginning of the Jeter era, 95, 96. I saw 5 World Series championships. I was a huge Jeter guy. Predating Jeter, actually, I had a love affair with Danny Tartable. I don't know who actually also played on the Kansas City Royals.
Oh yeah.
I was a big Tartable guy, big Tartable guy. And then when Jeter came on the scene, like every other kid in New York City, I fell in love with Derek Jeter, our captain. And I had a lot of Jeter stuff. I remember probably my first purchase I ever made at a Nationals, believe it or not, right, was a game-worn, game-used Chuck Knobloch bat from his first season when he was on the Yankees. Yeah. It was a lot of Yankee stuff growing up for sure.
What did you pay for that? I'm trying to think of frame of reference. Was that a $30?
That's a great question. I don't know. But first of all, I don't know. I must have been eight years old, so I doubt that I was the one who was paying for it. I'll have to go back and ask my dad.
That's fair. That's awesome. If you were to go back and kind of grab a set from growing up, any set or particular insert or card that you would go back and grab again? I think of me, like I love the 96, 97 basketball era with like Fleer, Ultra. For me, that's what sticks out the most. But anything in particular for you?
It's a fun one. I mean, look, I'd love to go back and gobble up all the 86 Jordans right about now, right? As a little bit of a plug for Collectable, our next IPO is coming this Thursday, and we're IPOing a Jordan PSA 10 from 86. So if anyone like me who wishes that they could go back in time and gobble up all the PSA 10 Jordans when they were worth very little, now's your time to be able to afford another PSA 10 Jordan. But as opposed to owning the physical card, you get to own shares of it.
There you go. All right, so let's get into this because you're anxious to talk about it. I'm anxious to talk about it. So walk us through a little bit of the origin story of Collectable, and then we'll kind of frame up what's happening right now with Collectable for the listeners so people know what's up. But give us the origin story behind it.
Yeah, so it's actually a fascinating origin story of Collectable, right? So our business hasn't always been a fractional investment platform.
Okay.
The company actually was founded in 2014 by a gentleman by the name of David Yokin and Jason Epstein. And the company originally was a sports auction data aggregator. Effectively, you could go on and see where items transacted on auction houses, I believe dating back to the 1970s. Right? So from that, we developed all these connections in the industry with auction houses and dealers and collectors, anyone who was really in the hobby. They knew about us, we knew about them, and it was a really good ride for those guys. We had about 20,000 users. And then, the fractional opportunities started becoming viable back in 2018. And Jason Epstein was the guy who led the company from that transition into the fractional space. And he set out for about 18 months to find a new CEO and to hire a new management team for the business to lead the company through its next chapter in the fractional ownership space. I was just lucky enough to meet Jason at the right time, and we got along, and he brought me on board to lead the charge back in January of 2020. So we've been working hard to get SEC qualification, to get SEC approved to do what we're doing. And we've been able to hire a tremendous, really talented team and been able to consign some amazing product, which we've already had the ability to launch for 3 weeks. Our first offering was a 53 Mickey Mantle PSA 10, one of only 2 in the world. We sold $1 million of it in the largest ever sports memorabilia fractional IPO by over $480,000. So it's been a tremendous ride so far. We're just getting going, but it's been fun to see the reaction. It's been fun to see the feedback, and it's been fun to see how much interest there is in fractional ownership. So we're incredibly excited about the opportunity, and again, just really excited for the industry, for the hobby, for all the stuff that's coming down the pipeline for everybody. I think this is really just the beginning of what could be an incredible ride for the industry for many years to come.
Absolutely. So connect the dots then for me from you early 2000s, maturing, working. I think you were in finance, right? Were you investment banking, whatever you were doing there? Connect the dots from then until you took over in January. Was there an inkling inside of you that was saying, okay, I got to find a way to get myself into the sports world or the sports hobby world because I think there's an opportunity, or did it just happen? And you just
So a little bit about my personal background, right? I did work on Wall Street for 10 years. I was actually at a New York City-based hedge fund. I was analyzing public and private companies in technology and consumer, media, sports, and retail. So I worked there for about 10 years. While I was there, I also co-founded the only still in existence and profitable minor league football league and scouting event company while I was there, right? We sent over 400 players back to the NFL, CFL, XFL, AAF. So I had this background of kind of sports entrepreneurship meets financial markets with this overlay of having been around the hobby my entire life, right? So, it was an interesting assortment of things that I had going for me when Collectable was looking for a new CEO. And, like a lot of people who work in finance, after a certain time, you just get a little burnt out by it. You want your next opportunity. So again, it was just the right place at the right time. But really what I saw was an interesting combination in the memorabilia category, right? It was this really interesting combination of passion and profits, right? People are passionate about sports. They're passionate about the hobby, and there's money to be made, right? Like you look at sports cards or sports memorabilia as an investment asset class, And by a lot of studies, it's dramatically outperformed traditional investments like stocks. The problem really has been that the best opportunities for investment, at least, have been at the upper end of the market, where average people, average sports fans like you and I, have been completely priced out of it. I could never afford to go out and buy a $2.5 million Mickey Mantle card. I'd love to have it in my portfolio, but I could never afford to own it outright. Right. So that was something that was interesting to me. How can we apply basic and widely accepted financial market principles to this really interesting investment asset class and make this asset class something that could be approachable and affordable for sports fans all across the world? Right. So that was the opportunity that I saw. And, I think everything I've seen so far has just led me to believe that this is, a really interesting opportunity. I think fractionalization is just getting going. I think the ability for people to invest in the hobby at the high end is just getting going. And I think that this is a really, again, I know I've said this 12 times already, but I really am genuinely excited as someone who's seen this hobby for 30 plus years. I'm genuinely excited for what's to come. I heard this amazing, or read this amazing tweet from Ravel recently. And it was, it was a poll, and he said, out of the following three industries, which one do you trust the most? Right? It was the stock market, it was sports memorabilia and trading cards, and sports gambling. Right? So those three. By a distant third, sports memorabilia and trading cards was the least trustworthy out of all those. It was less trustworthy than sports gambling. Right? So to me, that said two things. That said, A, that's a problem, right? Like that means we've done a lot of things wrong. We have, a lot of areas in which we can improve. But it also said to me, that's a massive opportunity to come in, to modernize the industry, to get rid of a lot of the bad actors, to have more integrity of data, to have easier transaction mechanisms, to reduce fees, to make it more regulated, right? So there were a lot of things which we liked about that opportunity. So again, just really excited about what's to come, and really excited for Collectable, but also really excited for the industry at large.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I'm not sure that's what you're referring to, but I know Ravel's been putting a great amount of content around sports cards and stuff. So when you see that, and when you enter the opportunity in January, did you have that mindset coming in that it's kind of a dirty industry and that this was an opportunity to maybe civilize it a little bit? Or was that kind of a surprising bit of data for you? Because it's always funny that you have a ton of new collectors coming in the hobby these days, and it's obviously brought up the market as a whole, and a lot of them don't realize some of the craziness that happens behind the scenes. Do you think
it wasn't overly surprising to me, because again, my dad is so active in it. So I've heard horror stories for him where he bought into things that were fraudulent or not real, or he dealt with bad actors who took him for a ride. I knew about all these things. Obviously, when you really delve deep into it, you learn more than you would just hearing it from somebody else, of course, right? But so it wasn't surprising, but I think it definitely was something that I thought was a massive opportunity. And then, what I didn't quite realize, although I had heard it often growing up, I didn't realize that the returns in the memorabilia and trading card category, at least at the upper end of the market, were as impressive as they were. Right? So again, it was this interesting opportunity to really combine passion and profits. And that's something that we say a lot at Collectable. It's a really interesting opportunity, passion and profits. People are passionate and people can make money in it. And it's also easy for people to understand, right? It's not rocket science. It's sports, right? So it's those factors that really were interesting to all of us, and was one of the key drivers in Collectable, our entire team going down this route and doing what we've been doing so far. Yeah, no, for sure. Right. I think that's the beauty of all this, right? We can go when we're done and go watch a player that we've invested in, and it means something. The word choice is interesting to me, because you're using the word passion and profits. And when I hear that, I think of the argument that's been festering in the hobby for the last 5 years. You've seen it, right? The hobbyist versus the new investor. Right.
traditionalists can't get around this idea that you can, quote, invest in sports cards.
Sure.
And I'm sure you've had to get around that a little bit. You're going to continue to have to get around that. Yeah. What is kind of your perspective on sports cards being a true investment? Obviously, considering your background in this, it's going to be a well-educated response.
Look, I think the data speaks for itself, right? I mean, it's inarguable that there has been a lot of money made in sports cards and sports memorabilia. That's a fact, right? I don't think that's arguable. What is arguable is the manner in which it's been done and who it's been accessible to, right? It's really only been accessible, the best opportunities and the most amount of money has only been accessible to wealthy collectors. That's a fact, right? So, it's just an interesting way for us to break down barriers to entry, to democratize the industry, to make this something that people can actually see, I potentially could make money in this. Now, you can't guarantee returns like any market. It could be cyclical. Things could go up. Things could go down. The economy could have a big downturn. There are a million things that could happen. It's like any other market. But just the ability for common sports fans of all income brackets all across the country to be able to tap into some of the things that has historically been a great place to invest, right? And again, like as it relates to fractionalization and the old school collectors versus the new school investors, we always say that our business is complementary to the hobby in a lot of ways, right? We're not trying to replace physical collecting. All of us, I'm a physical collector. I love seeing my physical memorabilia. I like collecting cards myself. Everyone on our management team is the same way, right? But the truth is we can never afford to physically own the stuff that we're able to put on Collectable's platform. So for us, it's not a substitute. It's just complementary, right? Like we can physically collect what's in our price range and what's affordable to us and what we love, but we can also invest in the stuff that has historically been really strong investments that we could never afford to own physically. So that's our stance on it.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think you're right. You aren't replacing what people are kind of used to at the very, I don't want to say lower level of the hobby because that's not a fair statement, but the normal way of collecting isn't being replaced here. I mean, the guys like you or I cannot touch the Jordan rookies and the mantles unless we get a little lucky later in life.
And look, I think that's something that's so cool about breakers, right? And the whole breaking culture too, is it's just another way to provide access to people who may never have access before. It requires a little bit of luck, sure, but it's an ability to get your hands on things that if you were to purchase an individual card, right, you might never be able to afford it. So again, it's just these mechanisms, these different ways of creating access to people who would never otherwise be able to afford it.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting to look back, even just 15 years of the transformation in the hobby, and you nailed it, right? 15 years ago when group breaking was basically introduced, it took a couple years and then it started kind of integrating itself into the hobby and becoming accepted in the norm, and normal traditionalists didn't despise every breaker. I know there's a whole group of them that still do. And then it's interesting too, just the last couple of years, seeing you got, all the digital components of the hobby, the blockchain, the digital technologies that Panini and Topps are both trying to integrate into the collectibles. So I don't know if collectable.com would have been able to fit into where we were 3 years ago, but it seems like right now it's just kind of a perfect segue into what you're doing. So talk a little bit about the sweet spot, because I know you mentioned certain cards and I've looked through the upcoming IPOs, right? There's I think a group of 30 Kawhi Leonard PSA 10 Prism Silvers. What's the sweet spot in terms of value and number of fractional owners that you're kind of aiming for?
Sure. Yeah, the sweet spot for us, right? The average value that we project of our IPOs will be somewhere roughly of $60,000 per offering. Now, we could have some offerings that are dramatically more than that. Our first offering was a Mickey Mantle 53 PSA 10, right? The total value there was $2.5 million, right? So there obviously will be some that will be significantly more expensive than 60, but we project roughly it'll net out somewhere around the $60,000 average, right? We need a certain threshold for our fee structure to be economical and makes sense, right? Because we're a regulated and qualified entity by the SEC, there are fixed costs to our business. There's legal fixed costs, there's broker-dealer fixed costs, right? So there's insurance and all that's the storage, right? So there are fixed costs to our business. So unless an item really is roughly $20,000 or more, the fee structure just gets a little out of whack. But in terms of the types of items, again, we're looking for really interesting, both historically, culturally significant items, ones that have scarcity and rarity to them, ones that have growth prospects for investors, right? We're looking for just premier athletes who are highly investable. We're going to target sports all across the bracket: baseball, basketball, football, hockey, golf, Olympics, you name it. We want to provide a breadth and depth of offerings for fractional investors. And what I can say very safely and confidently is a lot of the items that we're going to be putting on the platform are items that in many cases the sports memorabilia category has never seen transact before, right? So I think we're really interesting. If you're into this hobby, you're going to want to keep your eyes on us for the next couple months.
No, that's exciting. So I know when you're investing in a stock, right, you're a fractional owner of the company. But the beautiful thing about a stock, right, is there's a secondary market where you can trade that share. What is it going to look like then for the secondary market for Collectable? And really, what does that look like if I am an owner in this upcoming, Michael Jordan IPO? What are my options there?
Yeah. So the way we're doing it is when you make a purchase or an investment, there's a 90-day lockup period, at which point you're not able to transact. After those 90 days are up, you'll be able to buy, sell, and trade your interest just like you would a stock. We'll have a secondary market through our application, right? Our goal is to be able to provide people with liquidity, to be able to get their money in and out, to buy more, to take advantage of trends, to capitalize. Perhaps there are some good buying opportunities if players, have short-term hiccups, right? So, we anticipate, and our hope is that this will become a liquid secondary marketplace where people can log on to our application at all times of the day, 7 days a week, and be able to invest and trade and just have a lot of fun with this hobby.
That's beautiful. Okay, so 90-day lockup period, and at that point, within the secondary period, the platform inside the Collectable app, you'll be able to buy and sell those trades. So if you do miss out on IPO, there's a possibility you could pop in and buy and sell and get out of there. Okay. At what point then do you? And I'm assuming there's opportunities where the price appreciates so much where you want to offload the asset.
Yep.
What is that kind of in the cards? What's the process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're always evaluating and entertaining offers to for people to acquire the stuff on our platform.
Okay.
Right? I think that's a little bit of a push and pull. Obviously, we want people to have the ability to have their own free will, to not have things sold out from under them just because there's some need for the company to generate some profits, right? So it's a little bit of a push and pull. But yeah, we're always entertaining acquisition offers for our stuff. We fully anticipate that there will be offers to acquire a lot of our stuff. A lot of our stuff is things that many collectors would love to have in their portfolio and their PC. The process is that once we receive an acquisition offer, we'll take a shareholder vote, right? So we'll empower shareholders with the ability to say, yes, I want to sell at that price, or no, I don't want to sell at the price. If the majority of investors are interested in selling it, it'll get passed up to our advisory committee. Our advisory committee are some of the most knowledgeable appraisers, authenticators, hobbyists there is, and they'll ultimately have the final say. That advisory committee is an important part really to protect shareholders and to make sure that there's no foul play. But yeah, and ultimately, if it gets through a shareholder vote and our advisory committee approves it, we can accept a tender offer, an acquisition offer, and pay out investors in each offering pro rata to their ownership position.
Love it. If you're listening to this and not excited, I don't know what to tell you, because you've got every I dotted and every T crossed. Impressive. You sparkling water guy? I've been promoting.
I am. Yeah. Is that a flavored sparkling water?
It's a Kirkland signature, Costco. Yeah.
Very good. Very good stuff.
All right. So let's say I do have a card that I want to sell to Collectable, but I Well, I'm just thinking like in terms of selling a business, right? I want to remain kind of a vested owner in my business. What is the process for me to sell something to you guys and still be a part of the process?
Yeah, that's one thing that Collectable felt really strongly about, is the ability to allow sellers to retain some ownership in the items that they're consigning to Collectable. We've all had that experience where we've sold things because we needed money or we wanted to trade in and out of the hobby. There might be a better short-term opportunity, whatever, right? I've had that experience both in collectibles and in stocks. There have been stocks that, if you bought Amazon at $1,000 per share and it went up to 2,000, it'd be great to take some profits, but you also think Amazon might continue to go up in the future, right? Up until Collectable, really, there's no way to sell partial interest, or at least a liquid way to sell partial interest in a collectible, right? So it's a really interesting concept. And, I think that additional seller flexibility has allowed us to get our hands on supply that we never otherwise would have gotten our hands on. So that, again, the ability for sellers and consigners to retain partial equity and ownership of the items really allows us to bring the best possible pipeline to fractional owners. As it relates to how we actually acquire or consign items, we typically consign them. There could be cases where we acquire it if we just think it's mispriced, or we think that there's an opportunity or a particular seller just needs a cash advance in order to get it done. We have the ability to opportunistically acquire items if we deem that to be appropriate, but we're typically consigning items from sellers.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, you think about nowadays, right, where you do have a card bubble, whatever you want to call it, right? Prices have gone up considerably in the card market. You think about guys that have high end and they want to reduce their exposure, their risk. It makes perfect sense, right? There's a great opportunity for you to stay in the game, but take advantage of some of the high prices. You've thought about it. I love it. So when you were looking at kind of the correlation of this asset class versus other asset classes, and maybe, I don't know, we look at the stock market and how it's correlated with sports cards or fine art, whatever we may be. What, in your experience, what is sports cards in that market as a whole most resembling in terms of asset classes?
It's a really great question. Right? Yeah, I think one other thing that we've identified as an opportunity is to really do a much better job in terms of capturing data, right? There's not overly consistent or reliable data in this space. There really just isn't. I think there are a couple players who are innovating and capturing data significantly better, but overall, it's tough to find reliable data from which you can say, I think that's correct. The closest thing that I've seen really is the art market, right? I don't know that it's a perfect comp, but I think it's probably the best one there is. You look at correlations of the art market historically against the stock market, and it's 0.13. In layman terms, what that means is it's just not that correlated to the stock market, right? So typically, if the market is going down, the art market might be more stable. If the art market is going up, it's just not moving completely in trend with it. People think that that's a great thing because it allows them to diversify away from, the risk of the market at large. One thing that we've seen in the sports memorabilia and trading category, and I think this is probably a big part of it, and I'm sure this is not a new theory, but there is this, sense of emotional attachment, of nostalgia, and just, a broader understanding of what exactly memorabilia is and what cards are. And for whatever reason, it just leads to people in times of economic stress selling their collectibles less frequently than they perhaps would a stock. Right. So, there again, the correlation data that we've seen closest to is probably the art market. Certainly not a perfect comp, but probably the closest thing that we have at the moment. One of our missions for Collectable is to do a much better job with data capture, and we're going to have a lot of data points to our secondary market.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is a funny point, because you do look at historical data around art, fine art, and you would think during depressions or economic turmoil, that market would take a hit. And you're right. It means something. The sentimental value means a lot more than you realize. I think that's an interesting correlation in the sports market.
And that's not to say that, of course, in poor economic conditions, that's not to say that, the art market doesn't decline or the sports collectibles industry doesn't decline. Of course it does, right? but it might decline less, or it just might be uncorrelated. So again, from the historical data, that's not to say that it'll always be the case, but from the historical data, it seems like people tend to hold on to their collectibles more than they hold on to their stocks in times of economic stress.
Yeah, it's interesting. So talk to me then about the future, and this can be short term. Take the question however you want. What's a perfect case scenario for you in terms of volume? So obviously IPOs it's a big thing. I think about it in terms of the stock market world or collectible world. What's ideal case scenario? Every day you have a new release? Every week?
Right. Yeah, look, I think our only mission right now is to bring the best and the most amount of supply to the fractional space. We think it's a really cool opportunity to be able to provide opportunities to invest in stuff that people would never otherwise be able to afford, right? You may have seen some of the press about us when we first launched. We have $30 million worth of stuff under consignment already. And, just by sheer virtue of us being in the market and having received some press, we're getting new stuff by the day, right? So, we're not going to overly flood the market. We definitely want to prioritize quality. We want to prioritize things that meet our strict criteria for listing on the platform. But, we do want breadth. We want depth. We want options. As you know better than anyone, right? Like, collectors come in all different shapes, sizes, and interests. One person might be interested in vintage baseball. Someone else is interested in modern basketball, right? So there's all different types of interests, and we want to at least be able to provide something for everybody.
So where do you guys stand in terms of bringing in wax, so sealed wax, or do you have a cutoff in terms of we're not going to have modern day cards until they reach a certain point of maturity? What's kind of the thesis?
We're pretty opportunistic. We're pretty flexible. Again, we have a lot of connections in the hobby, auction houses. We have partnerships with auction houses, with dealers, with collectors, with athletes. So I wouldn't really limit ourselves to one particular thing. We are focused strictly on sports. So we are strictly, we draw the barrier for now on sports at least. But I don't think that there's a limit to the types of stuff that we could have. Right? Again, we want to be as experimental as possible. We want to provide the most amount of offerings as possible. And again, collectors come in all shapes, sizes, and interests. And so we'd like to be able to have as much for as many different interest types as possible.
I love it. You're polished. You got the politically correct answer. You're well rounded. I love it. So I did see that. Was it Emmitt Smith was your first
Emmitt Smith? Yeah, he's our first athlete ambassadorship. He's also an investor in our business.
Okay.
Emmitt Smith is coming at this from two interesting angles. One is, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't know about Emmitt Smith. Emmitt has his own authentication company called Provo. So an interesting thing there. He started that because he realized for too long that there were lots of concerns about forgeries. He saw it firsthand. He'd go to these shows. He'd be signing stuff that were proclaiming to be game-worn Emmitt Smith items that he realized, I never wore this helmet or pants or jersey, right? So he was incentivized and motivated by just the sheer amount of bad actors and forgeries to create his own authentication company to help stop that. Right, so he's coming at this from an authentication angle. He thinks Collectable, the fact that it's SEC qualified and items go through a pretty stringent process before coming on our platform. He thought that was, really advancing the ball forward when it comes to authentication. He's also coming at it from an interesting, athlete-related opportunity. I think what we've seen across a lot of different athlete sport opportunities is athletes are connecting directly with their fans. Right, kind of cutting out the middleman, communicating and sharing experiences and items directly with their fans. He thinks Collectable is a really interesting opportunity to, bring his own collection and to bring other prominent athletes to the table with their own, collection of stuff to allow athletes who shared in his career and all their careers the ability to invest and to own in some of the items that have the most meaning to him. So we're going to be putting a lot of Emmitt Smith items on the platform. This is a little bit private, but I'll share it with you tonight. The first item he'll be putting on the platform will be the jersey that he wore when he broke the NFL all-time rushing record in 2002. So a pretty cool item of his, something that obviously has a lot of meaning to him. And he wants to share it directly with the fan base. And he identified Collectable as the platform to do just that.
Yeah, see, that is an interesting kind of angle we don't think about. And I'm glad you brought it up, because Emmett, I'm assuming he's going to retain some degree of ownership of that still, right? He can allow us to participate in owning that jersey, but yet he can still retain it, which is a pretty cool thing. Pretty cool thing.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. And again, I think everyone always talks about you want to physically see it and hold it, and that's like the real collector in us. But the truth is how many of us own high valuable collectibles that's just sitting in a closet or a vault somewhere, right? So it's not like you're constantly breathing it or seeing it, right? It's it typically is in a secure location if it's something that's of that kind of value. So in theory, it's not that different from consigning it over to Collectable. We store it, we vault it, and we allow other people to invest in it while the athlete gets some liquidity up front for it.
Yeah. We're 3 cases in on certain cards, right? You're a sleeve into a top loader into a one touch into like these fireproof cases now. Couldn't agree more. Another thing about Emmitt Smith, I'm sure he would just be annoyed with all of the the draft day T-shirt relics that they're putting on. He's probably like, come on, man, this is ridiculous. So tell me a little bit about your perspective going forward of the sports card hobby in general, right? We kind of hinted towards this at the beginning. You started in January. You could probably look back in history and say the 9-month window that you've been a part of Collectable is maybe the most aggressive in the sports card world era that we've seen. What's kind of your perspective from now for the next 6 months, let's say? What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I had a crystal ball, of course, to see how this all shakes out. I've heard compelling arguments on both sides. There are people who think we're in a bubble and prices are out of control, and there are people who think this industry is just getting started, right? So I probably fall somewhere in between. I think there will always be, like any market, there's always opportunities. There's always, other areas of the market that pose more risk, right? One thing I can say and speak to firsthand is there's a lot of money coming into this space, perhaps for the first time, right? Real institutional money, people who are looking at this as an investment, perhaps for the first time. So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening, and that is attracting more money to the industry, which perhaps could be driving some of the asset values, right? And you hear influencers of all shapes and sizes saying that sports cards in particular are this generation's form of art, right? It's hard to know what to make of that, but what's inarguable is the fact that people have been calling for a bubble for a couple of years now. I remember when I first joined Collectable in 2020, in January 2020, I remember seeing tweets and reading about this, and everyone's saying, "Oh, this hobby's in a bubble, and prices are overinflated." And you look at what's happened since, and prices have only gone more and more parabolic from there. If there's one thing that I've learned from my 10 years on Wall Street is that people generally are horrible about predictions, right? Horrible. So I have no clue what's coming. I wish I did. You can make a lot of money if you could forecast the future. But what I do know is that what I love about Collectable, at least, is we're a marketplace just like any other marketplace, right? Sure. So if prices decline, tremendous. That will set up better opportunities for future investment down the road. If prices decline on our marketplace, which could happen, right, then people who have more of a long-term view and who are able to really cipher out the noise might have great opportunities for the long-term investing, right? So, I think like any marketplace, there will always be opportunities. There will always be areas to avoid. It's impossible to tell exactly where we are in the cycle. There is a lot of money coming into it for, perhaps for the first time. This industry is not that deep. You have a couple major institutional players. That alone can take up prices at the top end. So again, it's my way of saying I really have no clue what's going to happen, but I do think Collectable will stand to benefit and provide opportunities for people short-term, long-term, and be in a position to offer those kind of investing opportunities for people, again, all income brackets all across the country in an area where people otherwise would have been completely priced out of it.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair. So throw the crystal ball out then. If you could wave your magic wand that I know you probably have sitting right behind you, and you could fix something in the hobby, what would you fix?
That's a great question. I mean, look, the obvious thing that comes to mind, right, is, look, I think the grading companies have obviously done a far better job of providing a standardized grading system. It's not perfect, of course, right? I think further efforts, and I'm sure all the grading companies are on top of it. I know there are a couple, newer players who are coming in with a far more digital focus. But, I think just any ways that this industry can continue to give consumer confidence, investor confidence, collector confidence, any way that we can continue to strip out the bad actors and give people more of a sense of what they're investing in or buying is legit. I think that that's just going to open up this industry to, again, different people, different players, and just be for the good of the entire hobby. So again, I just think it's, continuing to take strides forward in authentication and integrity and trust, and really just be able to, share all the good things about this hobby that you and I both love. I'm sure all of your audience loves, right? We all love this hobby, want to grow this hobby together. But in order to do it, I think we need a significant better job in terms of consumer confidence, investor confidence, collector confidence. And, I think Collectable is just one of probably a handful of companies who luckily will be in a position to really advance the ball forward there.
That's great. That's a good response. Interesting. Yeah. I don't think there's probably a number of things we could fix, but I think the transparency is probably the biggest thing for sure. My last question then.
By the way, if you could change one thing about the hobby, what would that be?
I would say I would reduce the number of products being printed. I would kind of rein the hobby back in for a little bit and weather the storm and kind of make sure we've got some consistency. The moving to 35 releases a year, I think it only confuses and waters down, which is a pretty good thing happening right now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point too. When I was getting back in the hobby back in, probably November of last year, when I was evaluating this opportunity, I knew all about the trading card space. I grew up in the industry, but it was confusing. It was confusing to figure out all the series and, all the manufacturers and all the different things people can invest in. So yeah, I think that's not a bad place to start as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because people, you could run the numbers, and people have done this, and you could say print runs actually aren't that high for certain products. You think about the Topps flagships, the Panini Prisms, they're not incrementally as high as you think year over year. But what these manufacturers are doing is they're just diluting it by putting out 25 different products, and they'll make their money. Right? They have their on-demand products, and they got 48 different versions of a prism now that you can get. It's a little bit, I don't want to say deceiving, but it's pretty cloudy when it comes to new collectors and figuring out what the heck to do. So, data. I'm a data guy. I love all the data, the analytics.
Sure.
Tell me about what needs to be done to kind of solve the data issue with sports cards. And I mean, it can be as simple as it's really hard to decipher what's happening with sales data on eBay because there's no listing like formatting and structure that everyone's accepted, to like we just don't have enough data. Where do you kind of fall, and like what's your response to the data issue with sports cards?
Yeah, I think you just probably nailed both of the key points, right? It's the credibility of the data, filtering it to make sure that what's being included is legitimate. And it's also probably the volume of data points, right? So, what I love about the secondary market feature for not just Collectable, for other companies, Rally Road is another one who has a secondary market. Other companies will have a secondary market as well. It'll just provide more data points that are transparent, that are daily. You can slice and dice it. You can analyze it. You can create indices off of it. One thing that we're looking into is you can create different baskets of stuff, similar to in the public markets. You have ETFs or mutual funds, which if you just want to invest in the industry, but you don't necessarily want to pick individual cards or individual stocks, for instance, you'll be able to buy a portfolio of stuff, right? So I think that there's just a lot of blocking and tackling which could be done, a lot of basic financial market principles that could be applied to this industry. And the narrative of sports collectibles as an investment asset class, I can tell you from all of my conversations, that's not going anywhere. I think that's only going to become more and more standardized, more and more legitimized. And, I think because of that, because you have players like ourselves, we're bringing this financial markets approach to it. The beauty of it is you're going to see significantly better data. And that's just going to benefit everyone, right? When it comes to figuring out what something's worth, it'll just lead to much cleaner, much more reliable data. And, I think that's something that just as a hobbyist myself, someone who's grown up in it, I'm excited about that ability to kind of provide that data transparency.
Beautiful. Well, I don't know where people sit in the spectrum of investing and collecting and in the hobby, but everything that's happening at Collectable, in my perspective, is incredibly needed in the hobby. So I appreciate you being on the show. So I like to end on something we call rapid fire. So we're doing a little bit different. I'm going to give you 5 different words, and all you're going to do is you're going to give me the immediate word that comes to mind when you hear it.
Okay. There, try me.
Go with that. All right, Derek Jeter.
Captain.
Mark Wahlberg.
Stud.
Oh, all right. Netflix.
Netflix and chill.
Okay. Dave Portnoy. Davey Day Trader.
I would say controversial, but a tremendous entrepreneur.
Okay. Lotion.
Lotion?
Lotion.
I would say it's much, much needed. Always.
Well played. Well played. Ezra, man, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thanks, Dad. It's been a lot of fun to be here.
All right.
Take care. Bye.